20 seconds, don't you? No.
Oh, he goes and he does this.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think it's 20 seconds. In the spotlight. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the national headquarters of the Theosophical Society in America. My name is John Chianchosi. I'm the Director of Public Programs. At this time, I'd like you to turn off your cell phones and other noise-making electronic devices. This evening's presentation is being streamed live, and therefore I also welcome friends watching through the internet. The Theosophical Society promotes study, meditation, and service. We encourage open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts. And we have a deep respect for the unity of all life. Our goal is to help people explore the spiritual path so as to arrive at a deeper understanding regarding the wisdom of the ages. Furthermore, we feel this wisdom is not limited to any one tradition, and thus we offer programs from all traditions. If you have not already done so, please take one of our program catalogs where you'll find the programs that are being offered during the coming months. And you will also find these programs listed on our website, and there you can register for those that are of interest to you. The Theosophical Society is a membership organization, and there are many benefits to being a member, and there will be an additional benefit starting with our fall season, and I'll announce it now for the first time. It's just been decided that beginning in the fall, there will be no charge for members attending the Thursday night lectures. And so that is a great incentive for non-members to become members and for members to come every Thursday. So we'll all be happy. However, whether you're a member or non-member, what we offer here is open to the public, and everybody is always welcome. This evening, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Kathleen Rude. She holds a bachelor's degree in Wildlife Ecology and a master's in natural resources. She began her career as an environmental writer. Her studies of indigenous spiritual practice led her to become a shamanic practitioner and ceremonial leader. She has been mentored by Joanna Macy and is a senior facilitator of the Work That Reconnects. In addition to her Active Hope workshops, she also runs workshops on environmental awareness and earth-based spirituality. Kathleen is the author of The Redemption of Red Fire Woman. And I was told that we would have a book signing this evening for that. So I'm expecting that that will still happen. But before that, this evening, she will speak on hope in action, how to face the mess we're in without going crazy. Please join me in welcoming Kathleen Rude.
Thank you, John. And thank you all for being here tonight, and for those of you here in the room and for those of you viewing remotely. We're here tonight to explore the question, how do we face this mess we're in without going crazy? And it's quite a mess we're in, isn't it? We now have a report that says that all life as we know it may end by 2050 because of the climate crisis. Others tell us we have just 12 years to make radical changes to prevent this from happening. And if that weren't mess enough, we've created other ways to destroy our world. We have enough nuclear weapons throughout the world that if detonated would reduce the planet to a radioactive nightmare. Even if we're smart enough to not engage in nuclear war, we've already created over 240,000 tons of high-level radioactive waste from nuclear power plants in the United States alone. This waste will remain deadly for tens of thousands of years because we don't know how to neutralize it. We humans have such a great power that we can obliterate all life on Earth. And yet, as individuals, we can feel so utterly and completely powerless to do anything about it. It can be overwhelming. I don't have the answers. I don't know how to fix everything. There's so much certainty with all of this, too. Where will the answers come from? Will we be able to change fast enough? We simply don't know. It's quite the irony to be so powerful and yet feel so powerless. In the face of such uncertainty, we often see people respond either with apathy or with fear. Apathy is that place where we have no idea what to do. We don't have the energy or the time to do it, even if we knew. We don't want to know because someone else will surely figure it out. There's absolutely nothing I can do anyway, so I'm not even going to care. Or I simply won't acknowledge there's a problem. Fear is a place where we start to think only of ourselves. I'm afraid there won't be enough, so I'll make sure I have enough. I'm afraid of you because you're different, so I'm going to blame you. It must be your fault. Fear isolates us. We attribute blame, we hoard, we protect, we defend, and we go to war and create enemies. What is the alternative to apathy and fear? How do we live with the uncertainty of these times, with this irony of being so powerful and yet feeling so powerless? We practice active hope. Active hope is not the kind of hope that is more like wishful thinking. I hope the weather's nice today. I hope the Cubs will win another World Series. Active hope is fueled by desire of what you long for. It's having a vision of the world you would hope for. Hope is waiting for external forces to bring about what you desire. Active hope is about becoming participants in bringing about what we hope for. The term active hope was coined by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone in their book by the same name. Active hope has become synonymous with the interactive group process the book is based on. This process is called the Work That Reconnects, pioneered by eco-philosopher Joanna Macy. In our Saturday day-long workshop, we will immerse ourselves in the experiential, creative, and life-changing aspects of the Work That Reconnects. And I hope all of you will be able to attend. Tonight, we are going to nourish our brains and our hearts with the new perspective that active hope offers us and the wisdom behind the Work That Reconnects. Perspective is the lens through which we interpret our experiences of life. It's a powerful force, as this modern-day parable illustrates. One day, the father of a very wealthy family took his son on a trip to the country with the express purpose of showing him how poor people live. They spent a couple of days and nights on the farm of what would have been considered a very poor family. On their return from the trip, the father asked his son, "How was the trip?" "It was great, Dad." "Did you see how poor people live?" the father asked. "Oh, yeah," said the son. "So tell me, what did you learn from your trip?" The son answered, "I saw that we have one dog, and they have 4. We have a pool that reaches to the middle of our garden, and they have a creek that has no end. We have imported lanterns in our garden, but they have the stars at night. Our patio reaches to the front yard, and they have the whole horizon. We have a small piece of land to live on, and they have fields that go beyond our sight. We have servants who serve us, but they serve others. We buy our food, they grow theirs. We have walls around our property to protect us, but they have friends to protect them." The boy's father was speechless. Then his son added, "Thanks, Dad, for showing me how poor we are." Just like the boy in this story, we too have a choice of perspective in how we see our world and in how we see our ability to help heal our world. There are 3 stories I'm going to briefly share with you that describe the state of the world we're in. All of these stories are happening simultaneously. The first assumes that our society is on the right track and that we carry on with business as usual. The second reveals the destructive consequences of this approach to life. And the third story is about the groundswell of response to danger and a transition to life-sustaining civilization. Recognizing that we can choose the story we live from can be liberating and empowering. Finding a good story finding a good story to take part in adds to our sense of purpose and aliveness. So let's see which one of these stories you want to get behind. Business as usual. We live in a time of unparalleled technological marvels. We can travel to just about any place on the planet. We have access to food from around the world, advanced health care, and access to information and communication at a click of a mouse. Especially for those of us considered upper or middle class, we have lives that so many in the rest of the world are trying to emulate. What fuels this story is the belief that economies can and must continue to grow. Even in times of economic downturn and recession, the assumption is the economy is going to turn around. For this economy to grow, we need to continue to buy. The story also assumes that there are no limits to growth. There will always be enough space, resources, raw materials, opportunities for the economy to keep growing. Some core assumptions of business as usual. Economic growth is essential for prosperity. Nature is a commodity to be used for human purposes. Promoting consumption is good for the economy. The central plot for any individual is about getting ahead. And the problems of other people, nations, and species are not a primary concern. While many people in politics and in business continue to promote this story, we are getting very strong indications that there's a great price to pay for living in business as usual. This leads to our second story. The term "the great unraveling" comes from social thinker David Korten. It indicates an awareness of a world in serious decline. Every one of us can rattle off a list of issues that are greatly concerning. Here are some of the biggies: climate disruption and crisis, the sixth mass extinction of species and habitat loss, colonialization and oppression, wars, genocide, starvation, pollution of all kinds, depletion of the Earth's resources, economic decline and increased wealth disparity, and human overpopulation. We don't need to be an expert in any one of these fields to know that we're changing the world in ways that threaten our ability to survive on the planet. But fortunately, there's a third story that is growing in visibility and impact. This story we call the Great Turning. In our human history, we have undergone two major revolutions. In the agricultural revolution of 10,000 years ago, the domestication of plants and animals led to a radical shift in the way people lived. In the Industrial Revolution, that began just a few hundred years ago, a similar dramatic transition took place, but at a much faster rate. And with the advent of widespread electricity in 1914, we ramped up into a consumption-driven economy based on industrial growth. In both the industrial and agricultural revolutions, the entire basis of society was changed, including people's relationships to one another and with the earth. Right now, we are in the midst of a third revolution of equal scope and magnitude, and this revolution needs to happen not over the course of 100 years, but within decades, within the next 12 years. It's been called the ecological revolution or the sustainability revolution. It's also called the Great Turning. Joanna Macy describes it as the essential adventure of our time. It involves the transition from a doomed economy of industrial growth to a life-sustaining society committed to the recovery of the world. This transition is already well underway. Paul Hawken, in his book Blessed Unrest, began the process of listing organizations all over the world engaged in environmental, social justice, and other life-changing works. There are tens of thousands, and the number keeps growing. We are seeing our youth speaking out and taking action in profound ways. Here are just a few examples. Malala, the Pakistani human rights activist and youngest Nobel Prize laureate. the Earth Guardians, engaged youth taking part in political action and activism, and Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teen climate activist. To help us with a broader perspective on how the Great Turning is playing out, we identify 3 dimensions of this revolution. They are mutually reinforcing and equally necessary. No one dimension is more or less important than the others. The first dimension is called holding actions. They aim to hold back and slow down the damage being done. Some examples of holding actions include protests, vigils, marches, blockades, any kind of legislation or regulations to protect the environment, creation of protected areas, boycotting and picketing institutions and businesses, documenting the effects of industrial growth, our lobbying efforts, civil disobedience, whistleblowing, and providing assistance to people victimized by industrial growth society. Holding actions are often what we identify as activism, but over time we can find that holding actions become exhausting. So it's important to understand that this is not the only way to bring about change. Along with stopping the damage, we need to replace and transform the systems that cause the harm. So our second dimension of the Great Turning involves life-sustaining systems and practices. This dimension requires a rethinking of the way we do things, as well as a creative redesign of the structures and systems that make up our society. Some examples include claiming the rights of nature and future generations, the establishment of the precautionary principle, restorative justice and conflict resolution, holistic measures of wealth and prosperity, land trusts, intentional communities, permaculture, organic farming, community-supported agriculture, renewable energy, social and legal equality based on race, gender, sexual orientation, holistic health, family planning. We have a third dimension where we're participating in change in the Great Turning, and this we call shifts in consciousness. Because what inspires people to embark on projects or support programs that benefit others in the environment? It's the values we hold and the beliefs we follow. So this dimension of the Great Turning arises from shifts taking place in our hearts, our minds, and our views of reality. It involves insights and practices that resonate with core truths from all kinds of spiritual traditions and are in alignment with revolutionary new understandings from science. At the heart of this shift is consciousness. In consciousness is the realization that we are part of Earth. Some examples, come back. That all life is connected. There is no separate self. We see the Earth as a living system. We embrace the wisdom teachings from all traditions and religions. We're connecting deeply with nature. Programs that raise awareness of racism and transform attitudes and behaviors, recognition and honoring of First Nations peoples, eco-psychology, ecofeminism, environmental justice, honoring and considering future generations. We need engagement in all 3 dimensions to bring about lasting change. I find this perspective of the 3 dimensions to be incredibly helpful because too often we think that the only way to bring about change is through holding actions. But there are many ways that we contribute, and all are equally necessary. As you take in these dimensions, you can start to see all the ways you are already participating in the Great Turning, and recognize that you probably have engaged in all 3 at some time in your life. This also may suggest new areas of participation that you hadn't considered before. We have this broad roadmap for change, but it doesn't answer the questions, how do we continue to participate in the Great Turning when things seem so dire? Where do we find inspiration and solidarity to keep going? That's where the Work That Reconnects comes in. The Work That Reconnects is a 4-step process, group process, that incorporates experiential practices, movement, inspirational readings and teachings, and simple rituals. The central purpose of the work is to help us uncover and experience our innate connection with each other and with the systemic self-healing powers in the web of life, so that we may be enlivened and motivated to play our part in creating a sustainable civilization. The work, as we see here, starts in gratitude down in the lower right corner. Then it moves to honoring our pain for the world. From there, we move into seeing with new eyes, and we end up with the going forth. And as you'll see, this becomes an ongoing process that provides new insights and inspiration every time we engage in these 4 steps. Let's go around the spiral. We begin in gratitude. When someone does something nice for us, we say thank you. It's a response to something that pleases us. Thank you is a simple statement that can have a profound effect on the person hearing it and the person saying it. Gratitude is even more impactful when we adopt it as an attitude and not just a response. An attitude of gratitude. An attitude of gratitude is more than feeling grateful for something kind or nice. It is a decision to live life through the filter of gratitude, to find something to be grateful for in every situation. Even though we are gathered here tonight during challenging times, I am grateful to be sharing this time with so many caring, dedicated people. I'm grateful for the scientists who collect data to inform our decisions. I'm grateful for the innovators who tap their creativity to find new ways for us to live. And I'm grateful for those who keep and share a faith of love for one another. I'm also very grateful for this technology that lets me connect with those of you watching remotely and those of you who will be watching later. Take a moment to think about one thing that makes you smile. Just do that right now. One thing. It feels good to be grateful. But it does so much more than that. Joanna Macy refers to gratitude as a radical political act. It helps us to defy the powers that be that wish us to make us feel less than, not enough, and that drive us to destructive actions and emotions. We live in an economic world that wants us to believe that we are not enough, that we need to have this car or that dress, this shampoo, this house, to feel complete, to feel beautiful, to feel powerful or successful. The more stuff we have, the better we're supposed to feel. These messages can leave us feeling wanting and dissatisfied. This feeling of lack can keep us powerless. It feeds the need for bigger, better, faster, more and more and more. But gratitude can take us out of that mindset. It instantly connects us to what we do have and to who we truly are. And it can shift our sense of not enough into one of having enough and being enough. It connects us to our joy. You don't have to take my word for it. Researchers are focusing attention and study into assessing the impacts of practicing gratitude. They have studied more than 1,000 people from ages 8 to 80 and found that people who practice gratitude consistently report a host of benefits. They have stronger immune systems, less bothered by aches and pains, lower blood pressure. They exercise more and take better care of their health. They sleep longer and feel more refreshed when they wake. They have higher levels of positive emotions. They're more alert and alive. They experience more joy and pleasure. They're more helpful, generous, and compassionate. They're more forgiving, and they're more resilient. Maintaining an attitude of gratitude is truly powerful medicine, and it is especially important during times of great stress and trauma. Brother David Steindl-Rast, the world's foremost teacher of gratitude, writes, "Times that challenge us physically, emotionally, and spiritually may make it almost impossible for us to feel grateful. Yet we can decide to live gratefully, courageously open to life in all its fullness. By living the gratefulness we don't feel, we begin to feel the gratefulness we live." Gratitude opens us up to what it is that we love. Once we connect to all that we love, we also become aware of the great cost when we lose it. This moves us into the second part of the spiral, honoring our pain for the world. Zen poet Thich Nhat Hanh was once asked, "What do we need to do to save the world?" The questioner was expecting to hear some kind of strategies for fixing all the problems. But instead, his answer was, "What we need most to do is to hear within us the sounds of the earth crying." And to do this, we first need to allow ourselves to feel our own feelings about the problems of the world, the problems we're all facing, our feelings of anger, fear, grief, and hopelessness. We all have these feelings from time to time, or every day, or every hour. There's too much suffering in the world, too many complicated crises for us not to be affected. And what we need to embrace is this: it is perfectly normal, healthy, and imperative that we have these feelings. Our pain for the world is not a problem or a neurosis. It's actually part of the solution. We feel pain when we put our hand up to a flame. The pain tells us to pull our hand away before it gets burned. That physical pain serves a purpose, and we're grateful for it. Emotional pain works the same way. It gives us information about a situation so that we can know how to respond. They let us know when something is not working, is not healthy, is not safe. But if we shut down our emotional pain, if we deny it or suppress it, we are cutting off important information we need for survival and for sanity. And we do that, don't we? We live in a society that discourages expressions of tough emotions. When we start to cry, the first thing we do is apologize. We are afraid of these feelings for a variety of reasons, founded and unfounded. I'm afraid if I let myself experience the pain, I'll never get out of it. People will think I'm crazy or will turn away from me if I tell them or show them how I really feel. I don't know how to fix the situation, so I don't have a right to be upset about it. If I express these feelings, I'll be attracting more of that energy to me. I only think positive thoughts. I find there's great danger in denying the difficult things in life because we believe that we will manifest them by acknowledging them. It also tells us that strong emotions are somehow negative. Anger is negative. Grief is negative. But these feelings are neutral, and they are necessary. Suppressing these feelings causes emotional problems, including depression and PTSD. It also can cause physical illness. There's plenty of research out there to back this up. Emotions are not meant to be repressed or remain stuck. The English word emotion is derived from the French word émouvoir, and the French is based on the Latin word which means to move out. In other words, emotions need to be released. They need to move through us. One of the ways to do this is to honor these feelings. What do I mean by honoring? We give them space for expression. We honor their value in our lives, and we recognize the gifts they bring to us. It doesn't mean, however, that we get rid of them forever. As long as there are troubles in the world, these feelings will exist as well. But we can learn to live with them and be empowered by them, not defeated by them. What happens when we honor our pain for the world and our own pain? We don't get stuck there. We actually free up our ability to feel more deeply our love, our courage, and our joy. For you see, every emotion has its partner emotion. And if we shut down the difficult ones, we're eliminating our ability to feel the other ones. If I close myself off to grief, I'm also closing myself off to love. But when I am able to express my fear, I can also tap into my courage. So when I feel fear, I can feel courage. When I feel grief, I can feel love. When I feel anger, I feel my passion for justice. And when I feel emptiness, I can feel possibilities and hope. In honoring our pain, we realize that we are much more than our pain. We are not alone in our pain. Others share it. We feel more connected to others and the world around us. We also realize that we aren't feeling these things just out of our personal fear. We are feeling these things for others and for the world around us. This opens us up to our realization that we are all part of something larger than just ourselves. We are connected to all things. When we realize we're connected, we feel more empowered to act on behalf of the earth and others. I have to admit, sometimes this call to action on behalf of others brings up a lot of doubt. That doubt of who am I to make a difference in the world? I can feel the gratitude, I can feel the pain, the grief, and the fear. I know I'm not alone. But what can I really do about any of this? I'm just one person. Who am I to address the problems of the world? I find the answers to my doubt and questions in the third part of the spiral. How we answer these questions ultimately depends on our view of who and what we are. It depends on our understanding of how things really change, how change really happens. It's about seeing with new and ancient eyes. This part of the Work That Reconnects spiral is rich with teachings about how we can and need to remember and reclaim ancient wisdom and embrace new ways of understanding our world and our place in it. I'd like to talk about 3 perspectives through which we can see with new and ancient eyes: a wider sense of self, a larger view of time, and a different kind of power. An expanded sense of self. One of the symptoms of our industrial growth society is a preoccupation with self. This leads people to take actions that are based primarily on self-interest. It's important to have a healthy sense of self, but if we only identify as an individual, we can feel disconnected and isolated, and we may well not care how our actions impact others. But when we see ourselves as part of a family or a group, we can start to care about the well-being of others who fall into these groups. Our choices and actions take into consideration the needs of others. Our sense of caring and connection expands when we see ourselves as part of a larger community of people. What matters to me, what I see as being in my self-interest, now includes the well-being of everyone in my community. And likewise, when we start to see ourselves as part of the entire human society, our sense of self expands again. The color of someone's skin, the country of origin, their religious beliefs, their economic status, their sexual orientation. All of these things no longer divide us when we embrace all of humanity as being part of our identity as a human being. And when we expand that sense of self to include all life on the planet, we shift into another dimension of connection that empowers us with the realization that everything of Earth is our family, and we are part of everything on Earth. Philosopher Arnie Ness coined the term ecological self to describe this wider sense of identity that arises when our self-interest includes the natural world. This perspective of widening circles of self has given me one way to try and understand how the executives of fossil fuel companies, for example, can continue their destructive practices. They don't see themselves as part of these larger circles. All they care about are the elite communities they identify with. It's mind-boggling to me that they don't see themselves as part of the natural world or the global human community. I fantasize about how different the world would be if people running the multinational corporations, the governments, Wall Street, understood ecology, how ecosystems work, about photosynthesis and food chains, that humans are part of these food chains and natural processes, not separate from them. If they fully comprehended our interdependence and connection to the natural world, if they could just look at the trees and see them as the lungs of Earth, breathing out oxygen as they breathe in the carbon dioxide we give off, we would live in a much more just, kind, and sustainable world if we all embraced this expanded sense of self. Rather than destroying the planet, we would be cherishing it. Rather than killing off brother-sister species, we live in harmony with them. We have scientist James Lovelock to thank for taking our understanding of interconnectedness to the ultimate level. He recognized that the Earth is one huge living system that self-regulates in order to maintain conditions that sustain life. He called this awareness of Earth's aliveness Gaia theory. Gaia, as you may know, is the Greek goddess of Earth. Lovelock goes on to suppose that human beings have evolved with our ability for self-reflection to be the organs through which Gaia can know herself. He writes, "Through our eyes, she has for the first time seen her fair face, and our mind become aware of herself. We do indeed belong here. The earth is more than just a home. It's a living system, and we are part of it." We can find great strength and conviction to act on behalf of all life when we see ourselves in this way. Rainforest activist John Seed has a beautiful way of expressing this. When asked how he handles despair, Seed replies, "I try to remember that it's not me, John Seed, trying to protect the rainforest. Rather, I am part of the rainforest protecting itself. I am that part of the rainforest recently emerged into human thinking." When we see ourselves as part of the living body of Earth, we also become attuned to our collective evolutionary history that spans 4.6 billion years. And we also attune to the desire for life to continue for many millions more. This perspective invites us into an expanded sense of time. I'm only going to touch on this perspective tonight because we are going to explore and embody an expanded sense of time in our workshop on Saturday. The Great Turning is calling us into the age of sustainability. Sustainability is not a static state of being. It presupposes that life continues into a future that extends beyond our lifetime. In order to maintain conditions that will sustain life, we need to focus on what impacts our actions will have on beings who have not yet been born. This concept runs counter to our business as usual industrial growth perspective that focuses only on short-term results. This type of short-sightedness does not occur to our indigenous brothers and sisters. We can see through ancient eyes their wisdom of the 7th generation. When making decisions, many traditional people take into consideration both the immediate needs of their people and the needs of the people who will be alive 200 years into the future. They want to ensure that life continues, and they aren't willing to sacrifice that future for present gains. We need this connection and commitment to the future ones in order to foster and perpetuate a truly sustainable world. In our Saturday workshop, we will have a profound encounter with the future ones that will inspire and strengthen you in surprising ways. Another way of seeing with new and ancient eyes is through the exploration of a different kind of power. The most common way to think about power is in terms of those who have power and those who do not. Those who have access to resources, wealth, and privilege, and those who do not. In this view of power, someone wins and someone loses. We call this power over. Power is not shared. It is wielded by a few. There is a different perspective of power that the power over people don't want the rest of us to realize. That kind of power we call power with. It is available to all of us, not just the privileged few. There are 4 aspects of power with. The power of our inner strength when we face challenges and rise to the occasion. The power from cooperation with others. The subtle power of small steps whose impact is obvious only when we step back to see a larger picture or a situation over time. The energizing power of inspired vision that moves through and strengthens us when we act for a purpose bigger than ourselves. Bernie Sanders' first presidential campaign in 2016 is one example of power with. Bernie had an inspired vision to run a campaign financed only by small contributions, no corporate or PAC money. At the time, many doubted he would succeed. But with the help of inspired volunteers, savvy social media, and collaboration, he was able to prove the naysayers wrong. The Sanders campaign raised over $186 million from mostly small contributions. This approach to grassroots fundraising has changed how political campaigns raise money. The story of ending apartheid is another example of power with. In the early 1980s, the apartheid government of South Africa had a formidable military presence. Nelson Mandela, who has represented the African National Congress, had been imprisoned for more than 20 years. While many feared that civil war would be the only way to end apartheid, it didn't end because of any battle. Apartheid was dismantled through courageous discussion and agreement. Mandela took great risks in beginning secret conversations with F.W. de Klerk, the South African president, while still behind prison walls. Both sides of this conflict would have seen this willingness to talk as weakness and betrayal. But ultimately, the clandestine talks were effective because both men recognized that they had much to lose if war broke out, and they would gain much through peace. They moved from a power over scenario of win-lose to a power with one of win-win. Power with is based on synergy. Synergy is where two or more parties working together bring about results that would not have been possible if they had acted alone. Something new arises in the interaction. We think of this as 1 + 1 = 2 plus a little bit. In other words, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Synergy teaches us that we often cannot predict an outcome based on the individual steps or parts. And water is a perfect example of this. When we look at the hydrogen and oxygen as separate elements, there is nothing about their individual properties that explains the miracle of water that results when they combine. An orchestral symphony is also a type of synergy. If you listen to individual instruments playing their parts one at a time, you would not hear the symphony. It's only when all the instruments come together and play together that the composition in its fullness emerges. Synergy happens when we work together, talk with each other, dream together. Something new gets created that we didn't realize was possible. There's one more current that flows through the power with perspective. It's almost magical because we don't know when it will happen. I'm referring to emergence. Emergence is the process whereby something totally new arises that possesses qualities and capacities that were unknown or unavailable in the individual or campaigns involved in the change. The emergent change can't be predicted and often has expansive influence and reach. So while the negotiations between Mandela and de Klerk played a pivotal role in ending apartheid, the historic change would not have happened without a larger community of support. People within South Africa and around the world were engaged in actions that demanded change. Each individual act became part of a larger movement. So the end of apartheid wasn't scripted step by step or coordinated on all levels. Apartheid's demise emerged from the collective energy created from a myriad of actions, great and small, all over the world. While we can't create a strategic plan for emergence, we are beginning to understand the conditions that are necessary for emergence to occur. Social scientists Margaret Wheatley and Deborah Fries have been studying how to foster emergence to bring about widespread social change. Here's what they have to say. Despite current ads and slogans, the world doesn't change one person at a time. It changes as networks of relationships form among people who discover they have a common cause and vision of what's possible. This is good news for those of us intent on changing the world and creating a positive future. Rather than worry about critical mass, our work is to foster critical connections. We don't need to convince large numbers of people to change. Instead, we need to connect with kindred spirits. So through these relationships, we will develop new knowledge, practices, courage, and commitment that lead to broad-based change. But networks aren't the whole story. As networks grow and transform into active communities of practice, we discover how life truly changes, which is through emergence. When separate local efforts connect with each other as networks and then strengthen as communities of practice, suddenly and surprisingly, a new system possessing emerges at a greater level of scale. This system of influences possesses qualities and capacities that were unknown in the individual. It isn't that they were hidden. They simply didn't exist until the system emerged. They are properties of the system, not the individual, but once there, individuals possess them. And the system that emerges always possesses greater power and influence than is possible through planned incremental change. Emergence is how life creates radical change and takes things to scale. I see emergence as miraculous. This is where I find my hope for the world, in the power, the promise, and the magic of emergence, and in the myriad ways we can participate in bringing emergence forth. Seeing with new and ancient eyes brings important insights and understandings that empower us and motivate us to take action, to live our lives, to make decisions that support the kind of world we hope for, we long for, we dream for. This leads us into the fourth part of our spiral, going forth. I don't know about you, but I am a product-oriented person. I like to see the results of my efforts. I want to know that I'm able to bring about change. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, change rarely happens in a straight line. It's often not the product of direct cause and effect. Much to my chagrin, the adage that life is a journey, not a destination, is all too true. The work that reconnects has helped me rethink my preference for product over process. One of the most important lessons from our understanding of emergence is that we cannot predict what long-term impact our actions will have. This actually frees us from having to see the results of our actions. We can let that go. What's important is that we keep living our lives, making decisions that are in alignment with our values and beliefs, and recognize that our success comes in the doing, not in any anticipated or desired outcome. It's helpful to realize and accept that you can't fix or solve every issue that concerns you. It's simply impossible to do. It's also liberating to recognize that you don't have to have all the answers or do it all by yourself. So once you can come to terms with that, you will be able to choose issues and actions that feed your soul as well as your conscience. Theologian, author, and civil rights activist Howard Thurman said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." What makes you come alive? It's a fabulous question, and one I encourage you to ask yourself and answer for yourself. And then give yourself to that calling, taking one step at a time, continuing to move forward no matter the immediate results or lack of results. Keep going. Find others who share your vision and desires. Keep dancing in the mystery of emergence and the great turning. You never know when your next step might be the thing that enables something new to emerge that will help sustain life. The work that reconnects is described as a spiral because we continue to move through the 4 stages as we move through life. The spiral is an ongoing process, a wonderful interactive tool that offers perspective that empowers, strengthens, motivates, and nurtures us in times of great challenge and uncertainty. The work that reconnects truly helps us face the mess we're in without going crazy. I'd like to close this evening with a poem called The Great Turning by Christine Fry. You've asked me to tell you of the great turning, of how we saved the world from disaster. The answer is both simple and complex. We turned. For hundreds of years, we had turned away as life on Earth grew more precarious. We turned away from the homeless men on the streets, the stench from the river, the children orphaned in Iraq, the mothers dying of AIDS in Africa. We turned away because that is what we had been taught, to turn away from the pain, turn away from the hurt in another's eyes, from the drunken father or the friend betrayed. Always we were told in actions louder than words to turn away, turn away. And so we became a lonely people, caught up in a world moving too quickly, too mindlessly toward its own demise, until it seemed as if there was no safe place to turn, no place inside or out that did not remind us of fear or terror, despair and loss, anger and grief. Yet on one of those days, someone did turn, turned to face the pain, turned to face the stranger, turned to look at the smoldering world and the hatred seething in too many eyes, turned to face himself, herself. And then another turned, and another, and as they wept, they took each other's hands, until whole groups of people were turning, young and old, gay and straight, people of all colors, all nations, all religions, turning not only to the pain and hurt, but to beauty, gratitude, and love, turning to one another with forgiveness and a longing for peace in their hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Very inspiring. We do have time for questions, of course, as usual. So just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone if you would like to ask a question or if you'd like to share something.
I'd just like to very much thank you for this presentation, and I'm hoping I can make it this Saturday too. So, but thank you.
Thank you. And the workshop that we're doing will be here on Saturday from 10 to 5.
Kathleen, I have a question. While they're all thinking of what to ask, in that quote from Thurman, know what makes you come alive. Isn't it kind of sad that for many people, or is it sad, or at least tell me what you think, for many people in our present time of consumer and greed and success-oriented, what makes them feel come alive is when they're following that ambition to get and have and achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it seems to drive a lot of, especially the people in business and in many avenues in society.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
It is a real challenge to live in this society where we are constantly bombarded with these messages of needing to get ahead and have more and have more. But I am also really encouraged seeing people waking up in business as well as other places. And there are people now who are focusing their businesses, designing their businesses so to make sure that they are benefiting social causes or environmental causes. They are now called B corporations, and companies are getting certified as being B corporations, where they are saying that we can find a way to make a living, but also to do it in a way that honors the earth and honors each other. I'm also encouraged by the younger people coming up in the world who are starting to ask these questions and say, wait a minute, you know, we have these young people who are saying, wake up, we're in climate crisis and we need to figure out what we're doing here, and that's more important than having the latest gadget or the latest video game.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a comment that I agree with you because two of my sons live out on the West Coast in Oregon. One is a banker and the other one works for an actuarial firm. But both of those companies, at least, and I don't know if that's just a West Coast thing, but they're very concerned about not only helping themselves, but making sure that it magnifies into the community. And both of them, are an active part of that. And it's given me a whole new perspective on business. I had a brother-in-law who taught business ethics at Marquette, and I used to kid him about the fact that I don't get, it's like an oxymoron. but he said no, he was in business his whole life. And at least, up in Wisconsin, they also did tell businessmen and teach businessmen how to be ethical, which I thought, well, I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. And I think that when we have businesses that are local, smaller businesses who, again, have that relationship that understand they're a part of this community, there's a whole different relationship with the business and the community. And when we see with these multinational corporations, they don't belong anywhere. Right, so they're everywhere, and so that sense of caring about place doesn't happen. As we get into these larger businesses of scale, and so but it's also what we're starting to learn, and the businesses are starting to learn, is that you can still make money and do things that are good for people and good for the environment, and we also have the power to help. Educate them along those ways, because we have power in what it is that we buy or what it is that we don't buy, and asking corporations and businesses to be providing things that fit with our own values. And so we do find that we can start to make impact how businesses, how governments work. We've forgotten that we do have a voice, and I think some of the difficulty in the enormity of our issues and the constant bombardment with so many things coming at us is that we feel like my voice doesn't matter. And so then we stop speaking up or writing or communicating, and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But when we're talking with legislators, that when people call, when people voice their opinion, especially on the state level, people, they do listen, they do pay attention. And as we see with this beautiful idea of emergence, it really does take, it takes a village of each one of us doing what it is that we're called to do and participate in whatever way makes sense for you, with this understanding that we're part of this magical network where change can happen. Change can't happen if we're not participating in some way. And so I just really would like to encourage everybody to remember that that sense of power it's real. But we need to engage in it. We need to participate in it. And it doesn't mean that you've got to change your life and become, a radical activist. It's how we live our lives, the choices that we make, how we treat each other, that really continue to make a difference. Yeah.
Hi. So what I believe is that the biggest factor for any change to happen would be that we'd have to change how we think entirely, which I think is really important and really difficult, because when you just start thinking one thing, once you have your own train of thought and your own beliefs and your own ideas, it's really hard to just switch. That's why there's so many racist old people, even though that's just how they grew up, that was their time, and it's different now. It's way different than when they were here and when they were doing things. And I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this, but it's just, I like seeing how, when I go through Instagram, I see people really bringing up the topics. They're like, hey man, there are things that are just shortening our time here, They're taking away this opportunity to have a really, 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 really long living generations and more people, and we're taking away other people's happiness just because we're shortening our life on this earth. And I see we're breaking that wall of it's going to be impossible to change our culture and how we think of things, you know, how we think of our lives, our waste, our trash, you know, or, you know, where we're throwing our stuff. And I'm just kind of happy to see that. You know, it's hopeful. It gives me hope to see that it's not just one group of people. It's everyone's becoming more and more aware of the problems that we are facing, like, around us every day. And I come from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it's really closed off, and it's just so different here. Like, just the way like how people live here and compared to there, we're literally closed off. I never see people outside. That's a bit of an exaggeration. I see people outside, but just not as often as here. And I think the fact that it's Wyoming, it's small, everything's very small with not many people. And then here, there's so many people, like all the towns are like just molded together. And no, I'm just speaking. I don't know exactly where I'm going. I'm just saying that really, it's nice to see that we're connecting even though we're not.
Well, and I would say that too, that sense of change, you guys are doing that, you know, in the communication with Instagram and sharing and calling things out. You are bringing about change. And that very sense of you looking at this older generation, and they're like, what's with them? And you have a whole different view of the world. And that's really not that much time difference. And what we're seeing with the internet and our ability to communicate, that this also can facilitate that emergence of change. So please keep posting and keep speaking your truth, because that's how things continue to change. Yeah. Thank you.
Other question? Well, thank you so much, Kathleen. We do have some of, there's 2 titles, I think, of Kathleen's books available this evening. If you'd like to purchase one, maybe you can also get it signed, and that would be nice. I'll be back there to help you with that. But thank you for that very inspiring and uplifting and informative talk.
Thank you so much for having me. And I do want to correct, the Act of Hope book is not my book. That is Joanna Macy's.
Good.
And but I have I wrote a novel, The Redemption of Red Fire Women, which takes place out in western Colorado and is combines environmental issues, some wisdom that I learned from one of my Northern Ute teachers. So there's some Native American spirituality, a little bit of reincarnation, and of course a love story. So that is there on the back table.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
I just saw the 2 piles of books.
I don't want to take claim for that one, much as I would love to.
I just want to finish off with 2 announcements, or maybe it's 3. Anyway, there's a couple of announcements. Kathleen, as she mentioned, will be leading a workshop on Saturday from 10 to 5 p.m., Active Hope workshop, an actual practical, more of the practical application of what she has spoken about this evening. And if you would like to participate in that, please do register when you go home. If not when you go home, tomorrow morning, so that we have an idea of how many people will be participating on Saturday. Just go to our website. Next Thursday, we're not having a lecture here, because on Wednesday we're having a special event at the College of DuPage Venerable Ajahn Brahm is visiting from Australia, and he's giving a public lecture, and we're holding that at the College of DuPage because it will be quite a large audience, much larger than we can accommodate here. He is a very highly regarded meditation master, an international figure, has been recognized by, I just heard this, I just read this today, somebody sent me the link, that he was given an honor by the, Australia is a colony, well, had been a colony and is still a member of the Commonwealth. And the Queen of England is still the Queen of Australia. And he was given some honor in recognition of the work that he was on the Queen's list of honors for 2019, which is her birthday list of honors that she issues every year. Quite a recognition. He's received recognitions in Thailand, internationally. And but most of all, he's obviously inspired many hundreds of thousands of people all around the world. And we are very happy that he's coming here for a couple of days, doing a public lecture on Wednesday next week at the College of DuPage. Please pick up the, you can pick up the little flyer if you'd like to read about it or attend. You need to pre-register. He's also doing a program here on that Thursday, but that is already full, so we cannot accept any more registrations. Thursday, June 27 is when we have our next Thursday evening lecture, and that will be by Dr. Jagdish Dave, and he will be speaking on cultivating happy and peaceful relationships. And he is a meditation teacher, mindfulness practice, and he has taught, given a lecture and taught a workshop here previously, which was very well received, and we're happy that he's coming again. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Kathleen. Please do look at the books, purchase one, get it signed, and have some refreshments and stay a little longer for discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you. And just wanting to let you know that the workshop itself is very